Author's POV. Doctor's asked Jungkook to step outside without protest, without resistance, like a man who no longer know how to argue with fate. The door slid shut behind him with a soft hiss. Glass separated him from her now. Wyan lay on the bed, eyes open, staring outside the window, as if the sky held answers she couldn't find in the room, awake, breathing, alive. And yet impossibly distant, Jungkook stood there, unmoving, his reflection faint in the glass, hollow-eyed, bloodless, holding himself together only because there was nothing left to break. Footsteps echoed down the corridor. Namjoon, Jimin, Joshua. They stopped the moment they saw him. Jimin rushed forward, panic sharp in his voice. Hyung, what happened? Did something go wrong? Namjoon followed, eyes searching Jungkook's face, his chest tightening. Jungkook talked to us. What did the doctor say? Questions spilled each other, urgent, hurtful, fearful, hopeful. Jungkook didn't answer. He didn't even blink. Joshua stood a little behind them without sensing it. The weight in there, the silence that meant nothing. Something irreversible had occurred. Then the ICU doors opened. Again, the doctor stepped out, mask lowered, expression careful. She's awake, one of them said. Jimin sucked a sharp breath. Namjoon's shoulder sagged with relief, but the doctor's wasn't finished. She's out of the coma, he continued, voice steady but cautious. However, she's experiencing memory loss. We need to conduct detailed brain scans to determine the extent of the cause. The words landed one by one. Memory loss. Joshua's eyes widened slowly as understanding dawned. He turned to Jungkook, and for the first time in years, pity, not fear, filled his gaze. 6 months of hell. 6 months of repentance, lived minute by minute. 6 months of loving a woman who could not remember, respond. And now she was awake, but she didn't know him. Joshua clenched his jaw. He loves her like breathing, he thought, and now she doesn't even know who's standing there dying for her. Namjoon exhaled slowly, the relief in his chest twisting into something heavier. Jimin's eyes brimmed, his voice barely above a whisper. That's cruel. But Jungkook, still immoved, didn't speak, didn't react. He was standing, staring through the glass, eyes fixed on Ryan, on the way she looked smaller, somehow fragile, in a new way, alive, unreachable. Namjoon stepped closer. He stepped beside Jungkook, following his gaze, watching the woman who had broken 2 men in 2 different ways. After a long moment, Namjoon spoke, his voice not mocking, not angry. Just tired. I think your sins list isn't completed yet, Jungkook, he said quietly. That's why you're still being punished. Jungkook's throat worked for the first time since the door has closed. His eyes parted. She looked at me, he murmured, voice barely sound at all, like I was nobody. Namjoon didn't reply because there was nothing to say. Behind the glass, Wyan turned her head slightly, sunlight touching her face. alive, breathing, and not her of a man who had destroyed himself to keep her that way. And Jungkook stood there realizing that surviving her jump and not being the end of his punishment, it was only the beginning. Others' behavior. The corridor that had learned to hold its breath shattered into motion, footsteps rushed, and from the far end, too fast, too desperate to be calm. Mr. Kang came first, her half-buttoned hair disheveled, eyes wild with fear. Mrs. Kang followed, clutching Bora's hand so tightly her knuckles had gone white. Bora's lips trembled, tears already spilling as she searched the hallway for any signs of her sister. Why is my daughter? Mrs. Kang cried, voice breaking, before anyone could answer. She's awake, Jimin said softly, stepping forward. The word awake barely left his mouth before Mrs. Kang collapsed against Bora's, sobbing in relief and terror all at once. Alive, but at what cost? Before anyone could move further, a nurse approached. The neurologist was ready to speak. She said carefully, Mr. John? Jungkook stood up immediately. Mr. Kang followed, legs unsteady, but pride forcing him pride. Namjoon didn't wait to be invited. He walked into, because no matter how cruel the truth was, he needed to hear it with his own ears. They sat, 3 men, 3 different kinds of love, 3 broken versions of strength. The neurologist adjusted the scans on the screen, the images glowing, cold, and unforgiving. I'll be direct, he said gently. Due to the force of the impact, there was significant trauma in the frontal and temporal regions of her brain. He pointed at the shattered area. A nerve was severed. There was internal bleeding. 6 months ago, we stopped it, cleaning the area, stabilizing her, but the damage was already occurred. Silence thickened. Jungkook didn't blink. Mr. Kang's hands trembled in his lap. Namjoon's jaw locked so tightly it ached. She hasn't lost partial memory, the doctor continued, voice calm, devastating. She has lost all autobiographical memory, her past, her relationship, her experience, everything. Mr. Kang sucked a sharp breath. My daughter, he whispered. She won't remember us, the doctor hesitated. There is 0.1 chance, he said, but statistically it is almost impossible. The words felt like death sentence. Jungkook's vision blurred, not from tears, but from the sudden, crushing emptiness inside his chest. Not even he thought, not even memory. Mr. Kang bowed his head, shoulders shaking as silent tears slid down his face. My baby girl. I couldn't save her. Namjoon leaned back in the chair, staring at the ceiling like it might collapse and end up being faster. The only girl he had ever loved, gone, not dead, but erased. And Jungkook? Jungkook sat frozen, the wife who was his world, the women he had destroyed and loved in the same breath. Alive, but with no trace of him left inside her mind. 3 men sat in the despair, bound by the same loss, but unavailable to grieve in the same way. Because how do you mourn someone who's still breathing, yet will never remember who you were to her, and behind the wall in a quiet room filled with light and machines, Wayne stared at the window, unaware that 3 lives had been permanently undone for her to live. A shriek tore the corridor, not loud, not sudden, but broken, the kind that crawled underneath the skin, refused to leave. Jungkook's had snapped up. Namjoon was already moving. Mr. Kang's face driven, drained of color, as all 3 men ran towards the sound. Wine's room. They burst inside and the scene froze in front of the place. Wine was crying. Not quiet tears, not confusion. She was sobbing, hands clawing at the sheets, breath erratic, eyes wide with terror, like she had woken up in a stranger's nightmare. I don't know. I don't know where I am. Please. Mr. Khan was beside her, shaking, trying to hold her daughter's face. Baby, it's okay. Mama's here. Please, look at me. Wyan recoiled, flinched away. Eyes darted across the room, faces, voices, hands reaching out, strangers, all of them. Bora stood near the wall, frozen, her hands covering her mouth as if any sound from her would shatter what little was left of the moment. Doctors rushed in, speaking softly but urgently. It's all right, Wyan. Try to breathe. You're safe. No one will hurt you. Their words meant nothing. Her sobs only worsened. Then an old nurse stepped forward, hair severed with age, hands worn by years of care, her presence quite steady. She didn't rush, didn't raise her voice. She simply knelt beside the bed and spoke gently. Child, look at me. Something shifted. Wyan's cries fluttered. Her eyes, still flooded with fear, slowly moved to the old woman's face. Breathe with me. The nurse said softly, just like this. Wyan hesitated, then obeyed. Her sobs shook, but she leaned forward suddenly and clung to the nurse, burying her face against the woman's chest, like instincts had chosen safety before logic could. I don't know them. Wyan sobbed into a uniform. I don't know who they are. I don't know anybody. The words landed like bullets. Mrs. Kang's knees buckled. The words tilted. She swayed, about to collapse. And Jungle caught her, his arms wrapped around her just in time as her sobs broke free, violent and restrained. Unrestrained. My daughter. She doesn't know me. She doesn't know me. Jungle held her like he was holding the weight of his sins. His jaw trembled, his eyes burned. I'm sorry, he whispered. Again and again, voice. I'm so sorry. This is my fault. I'm sorry. I broke her. Mrs. Counts clutched his coat, prying into him like a mother with nothing left to lose. Namjoon stood frozen. Mr. Kang gripped the bed rail so hard his knuckles turned white, and in the center of it all, Wyan clung to the old nurse, crying like a child who had woken up in a dream without names. A world where love existed and memory did not. Wyan's POV. The house in Seoul doesn't feel like a home. It felt like a statement. Glass walls, high ceilings, quiet corridors that swallowed sound. Everything was new, too new, like no one had ever truly lived here before me. No memories clinging to the walls, no warmth settled to the furniture. I was told it was from my comfort. I believed them, but comfort shouldn't feel this intimidating. People moved around me carefully like I was made of something rare and unbreakable. Nurses spoke in hushed tones. Staff members asked permissions before doing anything, before opening curtains, before placing a blanket, before leaving the room. Even the air felt controlled. I tried to act normal. I smiled when my mum adjusted my shawl for the nth time. I nodded with my sister, explained where things were, even though I kept forgetting. I thanked the staff, even when I didn't understand why there were so many of them. Inside my chest was tight. Why did everyone look at me like I'd survived something unspeakable? The old nurse, Mrs. Han, stayed with me. She was the only familiar thing in this unfamiliar world. Life. When my thoughts spiraled, she grounded me. When my hands shook, she held them without asking questions. I stayed close to her. Then there was him. on Jungkook. This house belonged to him. I could feel it in a way everyone deferred to him without words, in the way decisions happened before he spoke. Power sat on him effortlessly. And yet, when he looked at me, there was no pride in his eyes, only restraint. He never entered my room without knocking, never sat too close, never touched me unless I reached first, and even then he hesitated like he was afraid I'd pull away. Sometimes I caught him standing near the window, watching me like he was memorizing something he was terrified of losing again. It made my skin prickle. Not fear, not confusion. I was given a room larger than any place I remembered. Clothes hung neatly in the wardrobe, my size, my style, apparently my taste. Books lined the shelves, already read, jewelry untouchable, elegant and expensive. None of it felt like mine. I felt like a guest in my own life. At night, the silence was loud. The house breathed around me, unfamiliar and hollow. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering why a man I didn't remember had built this entire world around keeping me safe. Because if people don't do this for strangers, they don't look at you with guilt in their eyes and devotion in their actions without history. Everyone here knew who I was. Everyone knew what I had been through, except me. And that scared me more than the scars on my body. Somewhere in this flawless house, under all the care and control, there was a past waiting for me. A past they were all terrified to tell me, and a man who loved me like breathing. While I didn't even know his name was supposed to mean something to my heart. Jungkook's POV. Mr. Kang looked at me the way fathers look at storms that have already taken everything. There was no hatred in his eyes. Only guilt, only grief. A quiet, bone-deep sadness that hurt more than anger ever could. She doesn't know, he said softly, almost to himself. And maybe that's mercy. His hand trembled when he folded them together. The man had lost his daughter once already. Now he was watching her live again without knowing who she had been or who she had loved. And still he didn't look at me with pity. Namjoon didn't. Namjoon stood by the window, arms crossed, jaw set like a stone. He didn't look at me when he spoke. This is the payment for every time she cried alone, for every time she begged you to listen, for every moment you loved her wrong. I didn't argue, because he was right. If hell had a form, this was it, breathing the same air as her, standing inches away, and being nothing to her. I was not. I was the one who stopped them, the doctors, her family, even Namjoon. No one tells her, I said, my voice barely holding together. Not yet, not like this. They all stared at me. I bowed my head. I beg you. I whispered, let me be the one. If she has to hate someone, let it be me, when she remembers not before. They didn't agree easily, but they agreed. So now, Wine wakes every morning, surrounded by care. She doesn't understand my wealth that frightens her, by people who treat her like she might shatter if she breathed too hard. She smiles politely. She says thank you. She tries to act normal, but I see it. The way her shoulders stiffen in unfamiliar rooms, the way she watches everyone's face for clues, like her own life is a puzzle she's terrified to solve, the way her eyes flick to me and then away instantly, Avery. She doesn't know who I am, not as her husband, not as a love, not as a man who wounded her. To her, I am just a stranger who once does, the man everyone listens to, the shadows that never leaves. And every night when the house goes quiet, I stand outside her door. I don't knock, I don't enter. I just stand there listening to her breathe on the other side, reminding myself she is alive, even if I no longer exist to her. My hands lift sometimes, it always falls back to my side. Because loving her now means restraint. It means silence. It means letting her live without the weight of my name. And as I rest my forehead against the wood of a door, my chest burning with everything I can say, I can't say I think I lost you once when you jumped. Now, I've lost you again when you're still breathing, and this time, you don't even know my name.